Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at feedback, particularly when we're talking about critique partners, alpha and beta readers. This is going to be a bit of a deviation from the typical videos that we do, and I'm actually not going to necessarily be taking a look at a movie or a book or something like to that effect, but rather actually discuss some of the ideas behind why feedback is so important. One of the first things I actually want to talk about is actually the value of feedback. Feedback is one of those things when we're writing our stories is that we come into it with generally a understanding of what the world is in how we view it. And what can end up happening is because what we are actually doing is we're actually translating our thoughts into words, that there is a loss of translation. There are things that get lost in that translation that we need to make sure that we're paying attention to, that we don't necessarily become aware of until somebody points it out to us. Now, this isn't necessarily just a single type of information that's not getting passed on. Not all of us are perfectly proficient when it comes to something like grammar or show don't tell or other types of critical writing tools that we all need to have in our tool belt. What feedback does is that it reveals some of the places that we are lacking when it comes to telling our story. Nobody is a perfect writer. Even the best have to go back and re-edit and take a look and see that they are putting forth the information that they're actually looking to present to the reader. Now, this could be multiple ways. You could be that you are less proficient in, say, a grammar area, or you could be less proficient in writing tight. I've talked about these in previous videos, but there are other things that we aren't experts in that when we're writing a book, it helps to have an expert in getting feedback from so that we are presenting a true understanding of reality. For instance, if we write a book about airplanes, but we don't have a complete understanding, we can make ourselves look foolish when we tell a story and it requires a certain aspect of the aircraft that because we are unfamiliar with aircraft, we are showing something that doesn't make sense. And you're going to find people who are going to push back on that. And one of the ways that we can avoid that is by getting feedback. There are variety types of feedback, and we're just going to go over a little bit of that today. There are multiple types of feedback when it comes to how we are telling our stories. We have professional. Professionals when we're talking about professionals, one of the ways that we're talking about is editors. Now, there are professional betas and alpha readers, but we'll go into that a little bit later. Some of the basic types of edits is we have copy edits, we have line edits, developmental edits, fact checking, and proofreading. These are just a handful of different types of edits that we could be doing, that we could be paying somebody for. One of the things that we also need to be aware of is that if we are submitting our work to a company, a publishing company, they are going to be footing the bills for all these types of editing because somebody has to be paid for this type of work. Unless you have somebody that's willing to do it for free, typically editing is a paid work. So if you have something that you are looking to get taken a look at by an editor, they are going to be requiring a certain level of payment that corresponds with the level of skill that they have. Typically, if you find somebody that's highly skilled, they are going to be a lot more pricey when it comes to the end product that they're going to give you as far as feedback. Now, for somebody who is not, so if somebody say is self-publishing, they're going to have to pay for these edits for themselves. They're going to have to find somebody and pay somebody to do these types of works. You could find websites where, like Fiverr, you can find people who are willing to do those edits for you. Now, something you need to be aware of is that because we are paying somebody to do these edits, we have to be very careful about the type of people that we are paying. We need to find somebody that is well received in their edits and has a good rapport with their people that they've edited for. Yes, I could pay somebody a couple $100 to do a edit for my book, but the problem is that I'm only going to be getting a couple $100 worth of work. We need to make sure that we're being smart about how we are paying for our edits. But if you're going for traditional publishing, you're going to get a lot of these paid for off the bat and it's going to be included in the publisher's requirements. Now, something else that we could be taking a look at is the non-professional side of feedback. One of the big ones is a critique group. I'm going to be linking a resource in the description below that's going to have a number of different websites that use critique groups. But I really wanted to talk about critique groups here because this is the one that I'm most familiar with. I've been a part of a critique group for years. Not to say that I have been as consistent with my own writing, but one of the things that a critique group does, and let me explain what the purpose of a critique group as opposed to, say, Alpha Reader is that a critique group, depending on how each group is set up, because you can have a wide variety of rules within the group that you need to be aware of. I've been a part of 2 different groups and they both had 2 different ways of doing the critiques. But one of the things that the critique group is you're actually taking small sections of your story and you're actually having multiple people take a look at it and do a basic edit or pointing out inconsistencies. Now, one of the other sides of this is that not only are they taking a look at your work, but you will have to be taking a look at their work. So typically what happens is that they'll have a group set up on a website or a Discord or wherever else you have these groups, and they'll actually send out a section and they'll have a limit to how many words that you can have your submission. They'll critique it, and then when they are ready, they will submit theirs and you have to critique it for them. And you'll have multiple different layers of feedback. Each person in the group might have different strengths. I know in my group, I have some that are more editor style in how they do their critiques, where I get a lot more feedback on my weaknesses, which is primarily in the section of grammar. But there are other things where I see where I wasn't able to make myself clear in what was going on. Using particular words, forgetting of the story sets up a mindset for the reader in how they understand it. You could use a word like buggy, and a word like buggy can show up in a medieval period or a Victorian period, or you can have it somewhere else like a dune buggy. But if you don't add the word dune buggy, you've created an opening scene that is inconsistent with what you're trying to do. These are some of the ways that you can be misrepresenting early on, and your reader has to readjust that early, which would make it hard for the reader to understand and try to process what's going on. You want to make that transition into the story as smooth as possible. And when you have a reader that starts off thinking that the situation is one way, that the timeline is one way, and then they transition and they find out, oh, no, that's not the case, that's going to cause problems for the reader. So another way that you can do it is, I've seen in the first group that I was a part, what happened is they actually had a singular document that everybody would critique, and then they would comment in that critique, and you would have a singular document where everybody had put in the issues that they found. Now, the one with the benefit for the first one was that there was a schedule that was set up. There was a schedule so you had to post, everybody posted every 4 weeks or whatever, how many people you had in the group. So say if you had 6 people in the group, every 6th week you posted, and then during that week, people would comment on it. The benefit for this is for people who are a lot more consistent with their writing. This makes a lot more sense because you have a constant flow of feedback, and every week you have a piece that you're submitting. Now, in the group that I'm in is a lot more laid back. Now, there are benefits and there are costs to this. Now, because of a more laid back, what can sometimes happen is that you're not going to get the feedback as regularly as you would like. Now, one of the benefits of this is that you don't necessarily have to be as consistent when it comes to providing the feedback. When times have been stressful for me, I have gone a fair amount of time without giving feedback, but I always try to catch up on what was submitted so that I am providing a benefit for the group, even if it's just a few comments. That is helpful to remind the writer of an area that they should be addressing. Now, another part of critique groups is that this is a very informal way of doing your editing. This is a first or second draft type of thing where you're not necessarily looking to get your final book ready to publish. This is a rough draft type of environment where you're submitting to this group to have a better understanding of what the world is going to look like and how the readers that you are working with are seeing your vision. Alpha readers are similar to this. Typically, alpha readers and critique partners are very, very basic when it comes to their feedback. Typically, you're talking type of grammar or basic small story structure things. You're not necessarily going to be seeing a lot of heavy edits or a lot of feedback or a ton of, end draft type of feedback in scenarios when you're talking about critique partners and alpha readers. One of the main differences, I believe, between the alpha readers and the critique partners is the alpha reader actually receives the whole book at a time. Now, every alpha reader is going to be different. Every situation is going to be different. I just want to try and give you an understanding of what you're looking for when it comes to these types of situations. Alpha readers are going to be looking more at the long arc of the story if you give them the whole book. Whereas with critique partners, or even if you have an alpha reader, a singular alpha reader that is doing small sections, we're talking about much more nuanced type of feedback on a chapter or section basis. Typically, you'll see a section of 10,000 words as being the limit for a critique group. You might have that for an alpha reader, or you might have the whole book. That way they can see the whole story rather than just small snippets. One of the downsides of doing snippets is that I could submit the first 10,000 words of a 100,000 word book and do that every week. And what can end up happening is that you're only going to get feedback sporadically over the course of the 10 weeks it's going to take to actually present the whole book to the group. And so depending on how your critique group is set up, typically people are doing critique groups in their spare time. So this is not a professional thing where they are able to just drop everything and do this reading. You have to be conscientious about how other people have their time, because they are also writing and don't have the time necessary to spend hours and hours just taking a look at other people's works. Now, beta readers are something that are a little bit more towards the final end draft. Typically, when you're looking for a beta reader, you're looking for somebody that's going to be in the demographic that you're actually looking to reach in your book. So for instance, if I am writing a space opera, I want to find a beta reader that is interested in space operas. But if I look for somebody if I'm willing to take anybody, and the person that I get as a beta reader is somebody who's more interested in Victorian drama, they are not going to necessarily going to have the understanding or the willingness to give you the type of feedback that would be applicable to people who generally read space operas. These are things that you need to keep in mind when we're talking about readers and how the readers are going to be playing out. For alpha and critique groups, it doesn't necessarily matter as much because they're going to be looking at the smaller aspect, not necessarily looking at it through the eyes of your demographic that you're looking to reach. Overall, I just wanted to talk about how feedback is one of the most important things when it comes to how we tell our story, because telling our story the first time is, as I've heard some people say, is sort of like a 4-year-old trying to retell day was in the kindergarten or preschool, where you have a ton of information that you're looking just to shovel in, and then from that you're trying to create a story structure that other people will be emotionally receptive to. In the end, this is just something that we need to keep in mind, and I'm going to be going over different types of feedback in the future, but I wanted to take this time now and actually discuss this because this is such a vital part of writing that a lot of people are so cautious and so scared about. Feedback, good feedback, is only going to be there to help you tell your story better. In the end, this is what it is. It is trying to tell the story that you have in a way that is emotionally connecting to those around you. At no point should your critique partners or beta readers or alpha readers should be retelling your story in the way that they like. That's not the purpose of either of these feedbacks. It's about telling the story in the way that you want to tell the story. Doesn't mean that your beta readers and alpha readers will like the story. You cannot make somebody else like the story. Your goal is to write your story. Nobody else likes it. That's perfectly fine. Writing a story is a lot more than just putting words on the page. It's about trying to understand reality and trying to connect my experience or our experience with the world and helping us see truth in the beauty that is this world. All right, everybody. That's all I have for today. I really wasn't planning for a very long video today, particularly since the last one was so long. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave it in the comment section below. As always, I will be linking some resources I use in the description below. Until next time, bye.
I am a poor, wayfaring stranger. I'm traveling through this world of woe, yet there's no sickness, toil, nor danger